Good day. We've got an incredible person to talk with today, Dan from Blue Triangle. We're going to talk about performance and how it relates to the business. So Dan, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for inviting me.
You're welcome. So you've shared some interesting insight to me about some folks you're working with that they've seen some performance improvement, and it's made a major impact on their business. So can you just talk a little bit about a story where a customer used your product, did some analysis, and in a very short period of time, it increased their revenue?
Correct, Kevin. One of the things that performance folks have always looked at, IT performance folks have always looked at, is the really deep technical information as to how a website or web page is performing and all the nuts and bolts that go into that. And I kind of like to step back a little bit and kind of think about the performance holistically as like a Ferrari. Mm-hmm. So you got the IT guys that have got the engine, the hood open in their detail, looking in there at all the particular nuts and bolts, trying to tweak the engine. And in reality, all you have to do is kind of look in the driver's seat to see someone who really cares about the entire vehicle, and the vehicle being the business.
Yep.
And being driven in a lot of cases by marketing teams and line of business teams. Mm-hmm. And when you mention the word performance to IT, everybody always thinks web performance immediately. Mm-hmm. If you use that same performance word with the business, they think revenue performance.
Yep.
So one of the things that we've been doing at Blue Triangle for a while now is to say, how can we get the person that's looking under the hood to correlate those metrics with actual revenue? In other words, it's nice to tweak everything. You can't tweak everything. You have to be able to tweak the things that will drive revenue the most. Mm-hmm. And so we essentially look at being able to align that word performance, web performance, with how it's impacting revenue.
Yep.
So one of the things that we look at a lot is and it's always interesting this time of year, because everyone's getting ready for holiday readiness, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But if you step back, there are probably 52 weeks worth of Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays. They're called marketing campaigns. Mm-hmm. You open up your Sunday paper and all those leaflets fall out, coupons, save this, save that. A lot of money is put into those by the business to develop all those assets, whether it's the e-commerce site, the application, loyalty emails that go out to members, to merchandising and essentially branding with the vendors that put the products together. Really, you want those things to be able to run well, and traditionally they've run in a vacuum. Someone will put them out and they'll measure the data after the fact and come back and say, here's how we perform. So what we've done is we've married the web performance up with those. The web performance guys tend to look at things like bounce rate, conversion rate. That's all great stuff. But the bounce rate is, I liken it to a Kentucky basketball program, one and done. Bounce rate, somebody comes to a page, they leave. Even though those types of hits are important, I want the person that maybe spent 5 or 6 click-throughs, 5 or 6 pages, and then didn't buy. Did they not buy because the campaign you were running was stale? Yep. They didn't want the product once they looked at it? Or is it because each page that they traversed took longer and longer to load? And if they the web performance would have been better on those during that customer journey, would they have continued on and purchased?
So in the case of, you mentioned to me before, you've actually seen cases where if you sped up the performance that there was a much bigger conversion rate, right?
Right. Ironically today we just closed a partnership with a major travel and transportation company, biggest one our company's ever done. And really the challenge they gave us when we engaged with them was, we get what web performance is all about. Show me by essentially helping us get more revenue out of that. Mm-hmm. Show us where to fix first, and let's help us prioritize that. So we actually sat with marketing and actually looked at, okay, here's the kinds of promotions you're running. And at this particular time, they have that peak period too that they're essentially advertising for about 3-4 months out. And those were going to run concurrently 2 or 3 weeks in a row. So we said, hey, look, we'll capture all the data of everything that's going on, that whole customer journey, and all the web performance data underneath. We'll take a look at it, we'll look under the hood, and we'll say, here's 5 things to fix. Go fix these 5 things. Don't do anything else. fix these 5 things. We think that's going to make a big difference in your performance. You know, maybe speed your pages up by 20% during that whole customer journey. Roll it out, and we'll measure it again live the next week. And we did that in the revenue spike that they saw during that comparison period it was eye-popping. So then we did it again. And then we started to expand it across their site, across the whole journey. We looked at, which path were their customers taking the most that was leading to conversion, and we said, let's focus on speeding that whole journey up, that combination of pages. So that in the marketing world, those are called customer journeys, and exit rates are something we look at, because an exit rate means I've had an engaged customer. If I have somebody that's gone 4 or 5 pages in and then has left because it just got too much, I want to focus on those pages with those highest exit rates, because that's the one that ultimately they're throwing their hands up saying, I can't stand it anymore. I may come back or I may not. A lot of times they don't. But it's a lot more important of a metric than a bounce rate, because it's not a one and done.
So you sped up that journey for the customers, and you saw them increase their revenue, 10, 20, 30%?
Typically it can be anything from a small amount to 20% or more, depending upon the type of campaign, the type of promotion. Is it a weekly? Is it a flash sale? Is it a loyalty email? They're all things that come into play. We look at things that traditionally IT has kind of, for some reason, let go of. So they own, like right now I hear a lot of code freeze. And I just wrote a blog about this. IT says, no, we're totally frozen, the stack's frozen, we're not making any changes. Yet there are things on those pages that change all the time. Tags, for instance. Marketing owns the tags. All of the tag management components and putting monetization and personalization information on there, and referencing third-party sites, social media sites. All of that stuff is owned by marketing and changes constantly. You fix it one day, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You fix one, another one pops up. But that's an example of something that continues to change even during a code freeze. So, but that's an asset that, even though it's part of a web page, it's not owned by IT. So we do a lot of work in helping customers identify the impacts of managing tags, putting them in the right loading order on a page. Having them on the page is one thing, but then knowing where to prioritize them and where to put them is another. Looking at the ones that are slowing your website down. I mean, you could have something that's loading an image, and in the case of the travel and transportation one, they were running a promotion where they had this really heavy Christmas image, and it was literally blocking the page load, and it was taking about 3 or 4 seconds just for that image to load, and people were leaving because nothing else was coming up because that image wasn't completing.
So at CMG a couple of years ago, we had a really good presenter talking about just how much faster performance had to become. Even a half second was resulting in about a 30% drop off in people on that site. So they done a lot of analysis on a bunch of different sites. In the past, people always talk in terms of 8 seconds and 4 seconds, and fairly, times that seem reasonable. But she was talking in terms of half second.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised, a half second, depending upon the volume. We do a lot of work with retailers that maybe do 1 billion, 2 billion online, but a lot of the smaller ones as well. Mm-hmm. And the page load time, reducing it, even that by only a half second versus 1 second, 2 seconds, and we've got analytics where we can actually measure what that revenue impact will be. But we also tell you, essentially across your site, hey, a half second on this page may mean more money than a half second on this other page. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of the conversion rate and revenue. And one of the things you have to do is you really have to break mobile out, because you really have 2 types. You have a smartphone and you have tablets. And people shop differently with those assets than they do desktop. We see a lot on the tablet side of people doing more browsing, adding to cart, and just research. And we see, so the conversion rates on those tend to be really low. The smartphones, which we see a lot of, it's a loyalty campaign, they get an email, they hit buy now. On the tablet side, you can spend a ton of time optimizing the performance for a tablet, but you're really limited by the technology on a tablet. People don't roll tablets over as much as they roll a phone. You don't ever see anybody in line at the Apple store for the new iPad. I still have an iPad too that I shop with. Well, you can speed that up all you want, but it's still limited by the dated hardware that comes with an iPad too. So it really, you got to kind of look at where to spend your money. And are your customers using iPads to convert? Is it the iPad to the majority of the devices that your customers are using? Well, then go ahead and see if you can spend some money on that. If not, don't. But it's looking at the entire picture and not just one individual entry point.
So it's clear to me you're providing this conversation between IT, the business, that really it's not been there before. I know in a lot of organizations I've worked with, IT organization, performance tends to be treated as another problem child. But now you're providing the ability for performance engineers in particular to be able to talk to the business specifically about what matters most to them, which is revenue, of course, which I think is pretty powerful. The part you just said a second ago about how things work differently with the mobile devices, especially in my phone, is interesting to me as well, because it's one of the things I've seen, which is as technology moves more in line with life, performance requirements change a lot. When you have a desktop, as you know, you can sit down and you've kind of allocated time. Whereas when you're now using that thing as you walk, as you drive, or whatever, performance requirements increase even more. So if you're talking about, I can give you an example. We work with a client where 1/3 of their deposits were failing on their mobile application. They didn't know it because they didn't have the insight at the time, and that was part of what we worked with them on. What was even more fascinating was what customers were doing. They were actually trying to do it while they were at stoplights. They were doing it while they were sitting on their couch watching the game. And when they become frustrated, they leave the app permanently. They don't come back.
Right. So we see that as well. So the interesting thing that this has done with what we've been doing with the marketing and business teams is we've kind of helped elevate what IT provides from a web performance perspective, but we've given the revenue component more of an eye in kind of its day in the sun that it should have. One thing that we've, by measuring revenue for both marketing and having the IT guys' eye on the ball, we've been in situations with customers where we'll be measuring a campaign. We'll watch the launch live. So we'll watch a loyalty email go out to 10 million people. We'll watch the page views come up. We'll watch the customer journey. We watch the conversion rate. On loyalty emails and campaigns, the conversion rates, they can be in the 30, 40, 50% range, where a normal just, generic going to the site and landing, that might be in the 3 to 6, 7% range. So to actually watch that traffic come in and to be able to watch the revenue, if I send an email, a loyalty email out like that on a Monday, and all of a sudden I see revenue down to 0 and page views go to 0, that tells me I've got an issue. And a lot of times we pick that up from the revenue number, sometimes 10, 15 minutes before the APM or application performance monitoring stack in IT picks any of it up. We had one instance we were watching a campaign live, and we were watching a customer journey, and we were watching people come in, and we weren't getting any conversions. We literally got, people would get to the thank you page, and 10% of the people who made the journey had already hit, hey, I want to buy, and yet not one of them converted. And when we looked at that, we said, geez, the only reason that could be is we've got a problem in the payment back end. It's not processing an order. And we were literally on the phone trying to diagnose that, and the payment folks were saying, no, we're up. 10 minutes in. Well, we're not up. So by actually looking at revenue numbers at that level, everything rolls up to that. So if you're not getting the revenue you expect, and your page views and journey associated with that go down to 0, you know there's something in the stack. So it's just taken a lot more of the typical IT set of eyes and moved it over to the business.
So instead of looking from the data center out, you're looking from that revenue customer into the data center.
Correct.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
Correct. And the challenge is with doing this, it's really an organizational challenge. As you know, a lot of folks, when they've organized marketing and IT, and then within IT, there's essentially a layer for each stack, and they look at the real user metrics, and they're very laser focused on everything that goes underneath that. But to get them up and out into the revenue folks, and to get the marketing guys and business folks understanding that, you say that those guys own web performance, but in a way you do.
Yeah.
Because if you load an image that takes 4 seconds to load and causes the page to slow down, that's something that you caused. If you put a social media tag on that's essentially going to block the buy it now button from being able to interact on a mobile device with the one click, then you've just moved performance into your domain.
Yeah.
So it's kind of eye-opening, because the capability to watch these kinds of things live and have the interaction between revenue and web performance really hasn't existed.
Well, I was going to tell you, as we wrap up, the thing that for me has been the most exciting is how you have been able to truly quantify the impact of performance to the business. The IT organization spend a lot of time, special performance engineers spend a lot of time trying to tell the business what they do is important. No longer do you have to tell that story. Your data tells that story.
Correct.
So I love that.
Correct.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate it.
All right.